Are we ready to proceed? Okay. We shall begin then. Good afternoon and welcome to this online hearing of the Committee of Adjustment for the City of Ottawa. The Committee of Adjustment is a quasi-judicial tribunal appointed by City Council to make decisions on certain types of applications under the Planning Act. My name is John Blatherwick and I'll be chairing this hearing today. Along with me are my fellow panel members, Heather McLean, Colin White, Michael Wildman, and I guess that's it. We don't have five today, just the four of us. Please take note that this video conference is being live streamed on YouTube. The video will be archived along with today's agenda on the city's website. Before we begin, we have a few items to outline for your information. While the issues surrounding development in the city are broad, our mandate is quite limited. The committee cannot consider aspects of the proposal that are not related to the required variances: noise, pollution, property maintenance, property values, prosecution for illegal construction, personal comments regarding neighbors, agents, or applicants, and additional variances without proper public notice. If there is an identified need for an additional variance or variances, including an increase in the extent of the relief required, a recirculation of the application is required. As part of the statutory public notification requirements, each applicant was required to post a sign on the property and file a statutory declaration confirming the sign and posting. And for today's hearing, I believe we have one item which we won't have to read the oath for. For the rest of the items on the hearing, we'll have to administer the oath or solemn declaration to the applicant or agent before we can proceed with their item. In terms of the regarding quorum, if this is lost during the hearing due to technical difficulties, the proceedings will pause to allow time for the resolution of the issue. Failing the ability to reinstate quorum, hearing the items remaining will resume at the outset of the next regularly scheduled meeting of the committee. In terms of the hearing process, listed on the agenda and appearing on the screen are the applications we will hear today. For the sake of efficiency, the committee may deal with agenda items in a different order. Note that the committee members have reviewed the application materials prior to this hearing and any written submissions received in support or in opposition. In addition, the committee will hear today oral submissions from any interested parties as part of our proceedings. The committee may ask for a brief presentation by the applicant, followed by questions from the members where clarification may be needed. The public submissions portion of the hearing will then begin, and any interested parties will be invited to make their submissions to the committee. Panel members may then ask follow-up questions where added clarification may be required. When you are called upon to provide your comments, we will ask you to do the following. Start with stating your name and municipal address. For the record, we may ask you to spell your name. Then begin your submission by addressing your comments to the panel members. You may ask questions, but please direct them only to the chair. Please limit your comments to a maximum of 5 minutes. Any exceptions will be at the committee's discretion. Once all interested parties have had an opportunity to address the panel, the public submissions portion of the hearing will then be closed. The committee will then make an oral decision to either grant or deny the application. The committee may also choose to reserve its decision. In such case, the panel will deliberate further on the evidence presented immediately following adjournment of the public hearing. In either case, the committee will send within 10 days of its decision and to all the parties and those who have requested it, a written decision that sets out the reasons for the decision. All decisions of the committee are subject to a 20-day appeal period during which the decision can be appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal for a fee. Before we begin, are there any declarations of interest for any of the members of the panel regarding this agenda or the agenda of panel 2 or 3? Unseen. We have no minutes to confirm. So we will move on to the request for adjournment today, and we have a few of them. First adjournment request is for item number 2 on the agenda, 797 Lonsdale Road. This is a minor variance application to permit a reduced corner side yard setback to expand the existing second story. And the request has come from the planning department, and the agent agrees. The planner there.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Upon a review of the application, planning staff noted that the front yard setback was measured incorrectly and would like not be zoning compliant, and an adjournment will allow time for the applicant to clarify the correct front yard setback measurement and add the additional minor variance to the application if necessary.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Lipke is there, I believe. And you're in agreement?
Hello, can you hear
Hi.
me?
Yeah.
You got me? Okay. Yeah, I understand the conditions of the adjournment. Yeah, I guess I don't, I mean, I was going to see what I could do to prevent an adjournment, but it looks like we have to go through this procedure for the front yard, curved corner side yard. So we'll go ahead and do that.
So the question to you is there going to be a need for a new plan to be filed, or are you going to file a minor variance?
We're just going everything's going to stay the same. We're just going to add some notes to the existing site plan that we submitted, and we'll add the additional second minor variance to the original application.
Okay. So you're adding a minor variance, which means we have to go through circulation on this application. All right. All right. So I guess we'll, with that, then I think we'll adjourn this sine die. All in favor of the adjournment, sine die. All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. The next application up for adjournment is item number 3, 16 Lowry Street. And this is a minor variance application to permit reduced rear and side yard setbacks for the conversion of the current dwelling into a 4-unit low-rise apartment. And the request has again come from the planning department. So there's a planner there. Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do believe that there are 2 additional variances required and a recirculation.
2 variances? Okay.
Yes.
And which variances would those be?
There's one relating to the facade setback for the front wall and one for the garbage pathway along the, I believe it's the southern side of the building.
Okay. Mr. Hamilton, have you saw the correspondence provided by one of the neighbors regarding the side yard?
The distance between their building and the building adjacent?
I think what we need to have from the applicant, frankly, is a clarification that that side yard requirement was met when construction was undertaken. To clarify it for the neighbor that the side yard is indeed the 1.2 meter side yard that was required. Well, the agent for this application is Ms. Sanford. Are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Your address for the record, please.
Sure. It's 3-108 Bridge Street in Picton, Ontario.
Okay. So you've heard from the planning department. Are you in agreement with the adjournment request?
Yeah, we are in agreement with the adjournment request, and we are currently in the process of providing that clarification to the community regarding that side yard setback and making sure their concerns are met.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And I think Mr. White has a question. Mr. White.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question. If I'm reading correctly, the comments from the planning department, there is mention of a streetscape character analysis required. Is that in fact required? And if so, what's the purpose of that? I believe it's a fairly lengthy process, a study requirement that's imposed on the applicant, if I'm not mistaken.
Mr. Hamilton.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there was formerly a need for a streetscape character analysis. It's my understanding that the parking space that was proposed in the initial submission is being removed, or there's conversation about it being removed. I might need clarification from the applicant. But if that parking space is removed, the SCA is no longer required.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wonder if we could just get clarification. Is that the fact, or are we still in a situation where that analysis is still required?
Mr. Hamilton.
Sorry, was that to myself or from the applicant?
Either one of you, I guess.
If-
Sure.
if-
Well, I can just go ahead and say that we do have a streetscape analysis prepared from 2018 with our prior submission, but we recognize that the requirements have now changed. So in removing the parking space, we don't believe that we require the streetscape analysis because it does indicate that we don't need it if we're not making exterior changes to the building. But in the event that we do need one, we are prepared to provide that documentation.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. And Miss Hode was also on the list of speakers, and I don't see her name on the Zoom screen. I'm assuming that the Hintonburg Community Association will not be speaking to the adjournment.
She is in attendance, Mr. Chair. I'm just bringing her in now.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Miss Hode. So to the
Sorry,
adjournment.
I've just been promoted. And all I have to say is we agree to the adjournment and we'll see you the next time. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hode. All right. So should we, I think we should adjourn this. Well, we're going to adjourn this sine die because there are additional variances needed and there will be a recirculation.
Sure. We would like to request if we can have that adjourned until the 19th of October. We do believe we have time to prepare our documentation in order to meet that hearing date if possible.
That might be pretty tight for committee. To make that you've got to go through a full recirculation for new variances.
We understand.
So I think we'll just adjourn sine die and get the materials to us as quickly as you can and we'll get it on the earliest agenda.
Sure.
I don't think the 19th of October is doable.
Okay.
All right. So to the matter of adjourning this application, sine die. All in favor?
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh. Next application on the agenda for adjournment is 368 Tweedsmuir. It's a minor variance application to permit a reduced rear yard setback for bicycle sheds and increase the number of units from 12 to 16 permitted for a low-rise apartment building. And the application or the request for adjournment has come from the planning department. And this is item 12 on the agenda. And I believe it's Miss Hill, who is the agent for the applicant. So from the department, please.
Thank you. We had formally requested an adjournment for revised plans and to address the bay windows. We have provided this morning a revised report removing that adjournment request. We no longer have concerns and there's an updated staff report.
Okay, so we can take this off the adjournment list and put it back into the regular agenda.
Yes.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. We'll see you. Well, I was going to say we'll see you later, Ms. Delbert. We're dealing with the next one. For the next adjournment request, it's for item 13 on the agenda, 436 Athlone Avenue. And this is a very similar application to number 12. And we have again, the planning department is requesting the adjournment. Ms. Licker, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Likewise, the adjournment request has been removed as reflected in the planning report that was submitted today in response to the revised plans. And the new planning report states no concerns from the department with respect to the requested variances.
Okay. So we don't have to adjourn. We don't have to deal with this as an adjournment either. We can put this into the normal rotation. All right.
Correct.
Okay. We'll see you in a while, Ms. Hill.
Thank you.
You're welcome. That concludes the adjournment requests. We'll now move on to the regular agenda. First item on the agenda is application number 1. A minor variance application to permit a reduced rear yard setback for an addition above an existing attached garage. The agent for this applicant is Mr. Sean Burgess. Is he there?
Mr. Chair, I don't see Mr. Burgess online. If he could raise his hand, I'll bring him in. Oh, I see him now.
Okay.
Hi.
Good
Mr.
afternoon.
Burgess?
Hi. I'm not the agent. I'm the joint homeowner with my wife, Shelley Kennedy.
All right. And for the record, your address, please.
3 Warrington Drive.
Okay. All right. So before we proceed, you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time.
We do.
I do. We do.
Okay. So this is an application to promote or to permit a reduced rear yard setback for an addition above an existing attached garage. And I'm just wondering, is there any change to the footprint of your dwelling with this addition being put on?
No,
So the Reno Valley Conservation Authority does not have to be involved in this application.
they advised us that they would want to request because we're, they would want us to apply because we are within the floodplain, but they wanted us to do that after we received approval from the city. But they did look at our plans on a preliminary basis in advance of coming to committee and let us know they had no concerns because there's no foundational work and no grading.
Okay. So they'll deal with you after we do.
Correct.
All right. Okay. So if you could just very briefly explain what you intend to do.
For certain. We are planning to make an approximately 170 square foot addition to the second level of the home over top of the existing garage. It will incorporate a sitting room and facilitate us removing the laundry upstairs in the house.
Okay. And from the perspective of the 4 tests of the Planning Act that need to be satisfied for us to approve an application.
So the rear yard setback currently sits at 10.84 as the requirement, and we're asking for that to be reduced to 9.5. So we are not making a major change. We're not changing the purpose of the dwelling, and it is a relatively small addition to the home. In terms of the 4 tests, I have to go back and look at what those are. But certainly the variance is desirable for the appropriate use of the property. The streetscape, I think, will be improved because we're working with an architect who has a lot of experience with older homes. We're maintaining the architectural integrity. The variance, I believe, as I already stated, is minor. The general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw is maintained as well. And the general intent and purpose of the official city plan is also maintained in that we are working with the Rideau River Valley Conservation Authority, and we are also going to be improving the energy efficiency of the home by making corrections to faulty work that was done previously, which has led to flooding in our kitchen. So
that's not pleasant.
Not so much, not a nice surprise.
No. Okay, well, we note that there are no objections or concerns from neighbors or or agencies. The planning department is in agreement with this application. Any questions from the members of the panel regarding this application? All right, in the matter of the variance application for 3 Warrington Drive, all in favor of the application as presented? Right. Your application is approved. Good luck with your project.
Thank you.
Now you have to pay money.
Yes.
All right. Next application we'll deal with today is item number 4 on the agenda, 439 Churchill Avenue North. It's a minor variance application to permit a reduced interior side yard, landscape area, driveway width, and permeable surface for additions to the existing building, resulting in a mixed-use development. And the agent for this application is Mr. Yakachuk. Is he there?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Before we begin, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
Yes, it was.
Okay. All right. So very briefly, Mr. Yakachuk, what is the relief you're requesting from us?
Sorry, Zach. We are requesting 4 variances to the zoning provision. First, reduce the interior yard setback from 5 meters to 2.53 meters. Reduce the minimum width of the landscape area abutting the residential zone from 3 meters to 0 meters. Reduce the minimum driveway for single traffic from 3 meters to 2.53 meters. And reduce the permeable surface requirement for parking space and drive aisle to only the parking spaces.
Why the last variance, including the drive aisle? Why can't you put permeable surface on that as well?
Well, with regard to the drive aisle, the existing the drive aisle is already an existing condition. So there's already an impermeable drive aisle present on the site. And within the tenor of the new bylaw to remain more environmentally friendly, we figured we ought not take out a driveway to put in another one. As well, the driving surface does have the parking spaces do have the permeable material. In addition to that area, all areas of the site under the new proposed development will be permeable except for the drive aisle and the entrance and exits to the site. So we feel that we are proposing to better meet the zoning bylaw as it stands.
The drive aisle is already asphalt.
That's correct.
Okay. Existing condition.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any questions from the members of the committee? All right, Mr. Yakachuk, as far as the 4 tests are concerned, how does your application meet the requirement?
Well, with regard to maintaining the general intent of the official plan, the proposed minor variance facilitates the establishment of a land use that is permitted in the general urban area where this is located and will contribute to an array of housing types and tenures, which will provide desirable patterns and build form. With regard to maintaining the intent of the zoning bylaw, aside from the provisions to which we are seeking variances, the proposed variances are minor. The general intent of the zoning bylaw to regulate land use and build form appropriately to the specific site content and characterized by land uses and build forms is met. We find that for the development and use of the lands, it is appropriate as it makes efficient use of the land, proposes a permitted land use, and is compatible with the existing context. And we find that all these variances are minor in nature as they are primarily existing conditions.
Okay. You're aware of the comments from Hydro Ottawa, standard stuff, service requirements, contact them.
That's correct.
And right away, people regarding private approach permits needed for the driveways, should that happen.
Yes.
And from the Transportation Engineering Services folks regarding the fact that Churchill Avenue is designated as a cycling spine route and requires a 23-meter right of way to be maintained as per Annex 1 of the OP.
Yes.
Okay. And there are no conditions being asked for, and there are no objections from anyone. All right. So in matter of item number 4 on the agenda, 439 Churchill Avenue, minor variance application. All in favor of the application as presented? Your application is approved. Good luck with your project.
Very good. Thank you very much, Chair.
You're welcome. Next application we'll deal with is item 5 on the agenda. This is 314 and 316 West Hill Avenue. These are consent applications to subdivide the property into 2 separate parcels of land for the existing semi-detached dwelling. And the agent for this item is Brian Ernst. Is he there?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
All right, Mr. Ernst, before we begin, you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time.
I do.
So this is a constructed semi.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
And occupied.
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, and I note that the requested conditions from the city are that a tree planting plan be provided, independent services be confirmed, and that there be a joint use and maintenance agreement for the property.
Yes, noted, Mr. Chair, and no objections.
Okay. There's no comment from the Conservation Authority or Hydro Ottawa. Right away, people again with their standard comments regarding private approach permits and extra driveways. And the planning department has no concerns with the application. Any questions or comments from the members of the panel? All right, in the matter of 314, 315 West Hill Avenue, the consent application, all in favor of the consent? Consent is granted.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're very welcome. Now move to item 6 on the agenda. 44 Eccles Street. And this is a minor variance application to permit a canopy projection into the interior side yard. And the agent for the applicant is Nadia DeCenti. Is she there?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm here.
All right, before we begin, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
I affirm.
Okay. So this is a minor variance to allow for a canopy projection into an interior side yard. Which side yard?
So, Mr. Chair, just for the record, so for my address, in case you need that, it's 2611 Queensview Drive, Suite 300.
Right.
And I'm also joined here today by Anthony Leaning from CSV Architects and Sarah Davis, who's the Executive Director for Cornerstone, who is joining, but not on camera. So the requested canopy projection into a required side yard is on the western side of the building.
Okay, so it's the west interior side yard.
Yes.
Okay. And if this is granted, what's the separation distance between that canopy and the property line on the west side?
So, so through you, Mr. Chair, so we've actually provided a 4.3 side yard setback. The canopy projection would be 2.4, so we're left with 1.9 meters from that canopy projection to the property line.
Right. And we note that there are there's no concerns from the planning department. There are no conditions. There are no comments from any of the neighbors. It seems that everybody is quite happy with this request for relief. Any questions from the panel on this regarding this application? All right, so in the matter of 44 Eccles Street, minor variance to permit a canopy projection into the interior western side yard. All in favor of the application? Your application's approved. Good luck with the project.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. We're now moving into the part of the agenda which is dealing with items which were adjourned from previous hearings. So first one we'll deal with is item 7. 55 Armstrong Street. This is a minor variance application to permit reduced side and front yard lot area and window area for the construction of a third unit. And I note that we need to do a slight rewrite on the subject of the application, because it is indicated on our notice that the owner wants to renovate the existing detached dwelling, yet it was clear from the correspondence from the owner that there's a ground floor and a second floor apartment. So this would necessitate a change in the description from an existing detached dwelling to a duplex dwelling, which is essentially what it is. We also note that there is a change in the subject, and I'll just read it out here. The renovations will include a new facade for both the detached dwelling, and we've removed and the detached garage located at the rear of the property. And it finishes off as shown on the plans filed with the committee. So the detached garage reference has been removed. Variance B now has been amended to read to permit a reduced front yard setback of 1.48 meters, whereas the bylaw requires that the front yard setback be no less than 1.5 meters. And variance C has been deleted in its entirety. So the agent for this application is Mr. Ziegler. Is he there?
Yes, I'm here.
Before we begin, Mr. Ziegler, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing, clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
Yes, it was.
Okay, and I think Mr. Wildman has a question. Mr. Wildman, please proceed.
A very small point, Mr. Chair, and I just picked up on it while you were speaking. I guess the word both also needs to be struck from the description before the actual variances.
Oh, yes. You're only dealing with one building. You really can't say both. Okay. So the new facade for detached dwelling.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Only dealing with one property. All right, Mr. Ziegler, if you'd please explain what your request to us in the context of the 4 tests of the Planning Act that we have to use to assess your application.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We believe that the variances requested are of a minor nature. We're just reducing the requirements of the bylaw by certain percentages, not entirely. So the variances that we're requesting, we believe are of a minor nature. We're generally following the intent of the land use as permitted in this neighborhood. It's an existing 2-story right now with an attic with a sloped roof, and we would like to take the sloped roof off and make it a flat roof so it's a more livable third unit. And we're following the general intent of the bylaws by providing residential, which are approved in the neighborhood. generally to increase the housing stock as well as to improve the neighborhood in general and to follow the character of the general renovations that have been taking place throughout the neighborhood in other projects. So we believe we meet the 4 tests as required by the committee.
Okay. Is the planner there for this file? You may have noticed that there are some concerns from the Hittenberg Community Association regarding the stairs on the garage and whether or not this requires a further variance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. According to the site plan, it stated that the stairs that were attached to the garage were existing, and according with correspondence with the neighbor, it sounded like they weren't existing. That's why the report was explicit in saying that the discussions today were just about the principal dwelling, and if the stairs are to be added in the future, that would require its own minor variance if they're not existing and legal non-complying today.
So the issue of the garage is not before us today.
That's correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you, Mr. Ziegler. Ms. Hode from the Hittenberg Community Association, I believe, also wished to speak on this item. Ms. Hode.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Your address for the record, please.
Yes, I was going to give that to you. It's 509-1000 Wellington Street West.
Okay.
And I guess my concern is that the site plan submitted, which will be part of your approval, indicates that the stairs are existing. I would hope that we could have the applicant cross out those stairs, or because I understand that you won't be giving permission for the stairs to be constructed, but they aren't there and it shouldn't be appearing on the plan in my view, but I leave that to your discretion. We are not opposed to the application per se. It will be good to have that house repaired and another unit in the neighborhood. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Ziegler, so you've heard from Ms. Hode. Does your site plan indicate that there are stairs on the garage?
Yes, originally, Mr. Chairman, they were intended to be constructed, but they are, as per the last meeting that we were at the Committee of Adjustment with, we agreed that the stairs were not going to be included, and they have been stricken from the construction plan, not to be included in the construction as well.
However, does this committee have the amended site plan that shows that this garage does not have stairs?
The stairs are still indicated on the plan. We just put a note on it that they are not to be constructed at this point.
We are going to need an amended site plan that shows this garage without attached stairs. We can make our approval conditional on receiving this further information from you.
Yes, we can provide that stair being removed tomorrow to the Committee of Adjustment.
Would that satisfy the Community Association, Ms. Hode?
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Mr. White, you had a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I note in a copy of a plan that I have, on the plan, there's a revision dated September 22nd this year, and the note indicates that there's a removal of an existing stairway at the front of the building. When I say the front, adjacent to or fronting on to Armstrong. Sorry, it's the street Armstrong. Yes, is that the stairway in question that we're talking about?
No,
that's not the one. Okay,
oh, it's the one in the garage.
There is one indicating to be removed, but that's not the one that we are speaking about.
No, we're dealing with the one on the garage that shouldn't be there in the site plan. So Mr. Ziegler is going to remove that and provide us with an amended site plan.
Thank you.
Which will be accurate for our needs, to our needs anyway. Okay. Any further questions from the members of the panel? All right. So regarding the 55 Armstrong, minor variance application for side front yard lot area, window area for the construction of a third unit, with the condition that we receive an amended site plan that shows the stairs are moved from the detached garage in the rear of the property. All in favor of the application as presented, as amended. All right, your application's approved, and you can just send us the amended site plan at your earliest convenience.
I will do that. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. All right. Next application that is before us today is item 8 on the agenda, 476 Wilbrod Street. And this is a minor variance application to permit reduced westerly and easterly interior side yard setbacks for the construction of an addition in the rear yard. We had a significant discussion regarding this application the last time it was before us. So Mr. Hopkins is the agent for the applicant. Is he there?
Yeah, right here.
Okay, before we proceed, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
I do.
Okay, so to the request for relief and in relevance to in relation to the 4 tests of the Planning Act that we have to use to determine whether or not your application will be approved, please proceed, Mr.
Okay, so we are looking. Oh, sorry. We are looking to reduce the side yard setback by 1.5 meters for the entire length of the building. This would be for the addition that's going off the back half of the building. As for the 4 tests, the purpose of the official plan, the requested variance will provide intensification to the greenbelt. Services exist and maintained efficiently. For the purpose of the zoning and bylaw, the subject property is R5B, which you can do a low-rise apartment building. As it's desirable, assuming that the city wants intensification in the area, we think that it's achievable with this minor variance. And then, is it minor by nature? We believe that it's a 1.5 meter reduction is minor.
And where are you in the site plan review process?
We're on a second round comments.
And do you figure that there will be any further variances as a result of the site plan review process?
No, not at all. We've already looked into that, and there was no major changes on the site plan, so everything looks good.
So we don't foresee any future variances regarding this property.
No.
Your site plan review is just about complete.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any questions or comments from the members of the panel regarding this application? I note that Hydro Ottawa has its standard comment for service requirements. Contact them. Right away, people, again, private approach permit required for any new relocated or widened driveway. There are no other conditions. The planning department has no concerns with the application. We do have, however, on our speakers list today, Veronica Porter and Jeff Gottling at 479 Wilbrod Street. I'd like to speak to the application. Are they there?
Hi there.
Hi.
So thank you very much for allowing us to be part of this conversation.
It's your right. We're not allowing you.
So just as a clarification, I'd like to ask, my understanding is that the minor variance is being requested for a consistent 1.5 meter setback from the property line. It seems to me as though since the addition is beyond 21 meters from the front property line, it's actually a 4.5 meter difference. Is that correct? In the location of the addition, it is meant to be a 6 meter
Well,
offset.
this is why the variance is before us. It's to reduce that side yard setback to 1.5 meters.
To 1.5, okay, yeah.
And for the whole length of the addition, which is pretty,
Yes, I
pretty
understand.
standard ever since those provisions went into the zoning bylaw. All the time we get applications in that say, oh, I want to keep the same setback requirement right down that property line.
Right,
rather
that's
than step it.
understood. And so did the proponent take a look at preparing a proposal where there's no minor variance required? Where it keeps the 6 meter offset from the property line in this location?
If there wasn't any requested variances, there'd be something be getting built that met the bylaw, but the applicant has the right to apply for relief.
Of course.
The zoning
Yes,
bylaw, and that's what they've done.
yes, that's understood. Okay, great, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay. So in the matter of 476 Wilbrod Street minor variance application to permit reduced westerly and easterly interior side yard setbacks with the construction of the addition of the rear yard of this property. All in favor of the application as presented. All right. Your application's approved. Good luck with your project.
Thank you.
I remember 30 years ago, the guru said the computer is going to eliminate the use of paper. Not quite. All right, item 9 on the agenda is the next item we'll deal with, 44 and 46 Imperial Avenue. These are consent applications to sever the property into 2 separate parcels of land for the existing semi-detached dwelling. And this is Mr. Segreto as the agent. You have already sworn to the oath. We adjourned this for some clarification regarding the parcels, Mr. Segreto.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. McLean. Ms. McLean had a number of questions for you the last time we met.
Yes. So since then, what we've done is we've gone to the site, we've taken some photographs, and we've actually got a draft reference plan, which was deposited. The original one was not deposited, but I submitted the one that was deposited. And it clearly states where part 4 is and the question that Ms. McLean had at the time. And in addition to that, the photographs that she was asking for as well. And I believe there was a question about the party wall of the existing, the existing dwelling. And I do have a letter from the architect who did the wall inspection, which I can submit to the city. And he clearly states in it that the party wall is a 1 hour separation from the basement to the other side of the floor. And I will submit this application, this letter to the committee as well.
That'd be helpful. Do we have that survey plan?
Yeah, you should.
I'm just wondering if we can put it up. For Mr. White's benefit, he wasn't here last time.
So, Mr. Chair, you can clearly see that this is the plan that was deposited. And the plan which was before, part 4 was reversed. And this is the question I believe that Ms. McLean had, because part 4 was at the bottom.
Okay.
So you can clearly see that part 1 is the back, and that little 2-foot piece in the back does belong to part 1. So that's been clarified there. There was another question which came from the abutting neighbor as well. If you can see at the middle of the driveway, they were just asking if that piece there where the 2 arrows are, if that could be slightly pushed in 15 inches or so. And I believe that the owners are discussing this with my clients are discussing this with the owners, the neighboring owners. And I believe if they come to terms, I don't think it's a big issue, but that line can be moved in, say 14, 15 inches by about 10 feet, but it's not required. This is a plan that has been deposited and has been approved in the past.
And if that line's moved, you don't have to come back to us?
I don't think so, because really it's not affecting anything at all, because it's ownership of parts 2, 3, and 4. You're just moving that line over. It has no impact on anything with lot width or lot area or anything like that, because it's the same ownership.
Right. Okay, Mr. Segredo, thank you. Mr. Plain?
I would maybe disagree. If the line is moved and it's to become a right of way, the right of way would be redefined and it would require a further application. So, but at this point, I guess we're just being asked to approve the application based on that curved right of way, the way it's shown on the registered plan. Any relocation, I think, would require a further application, but I'll just leave it at that.
Your client may have to talk to their lawyer, Mr. Segredo.
Well, I've spoken with their lawyer, and he said to Mr. Wong, just said to me, listen, it's out of courtesy if you want to move it over or not, but we realize that you have a deposited plan on record that indicates the right of way.
All right. Okay. Well, we're not dealing with that, but we've got part 4 clarified. So your concerns have been addressed, Ms. McLean?
Yeah, I think so, Mr. Chair. Just that I guess the notice refers to a draft 4R plan, and given that part 4 has changed from the draft 4R plan to the register plan, there may be a need for an amendment there. I'd just ask Mr. Segredo about that.
I agree with you, Ms. McLean. I think in the wording that it is a draft OR plan which has been deposited, so therefore we should indicate that it's the deposited plan.
Okay. Well, that clarifies that, I take it. Okay. You're aware of the conditions, Mr. Segredo?
Yes,
Parkland, trees and trust application, independent services confirmed, noise attenuation study or noise level agreement, a joint use and maintenance agreement, and building code services requiring the 1 hour fire separation. And you're going to provide us with the letter from the architect regarding that issue.
I will. I'll send that off.
And the planning department as well, I'm assuming.
That's correct.
Okay. Any other questions to the members of the panel on this application? All right, so in the matter of 44 and 46 Imperial Avenue, the consent application to sever the property. All in favor of the application as amended? All right. Application's approved, Mr. Segredo.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next application we'll deal with are items 10 and 11. 305 Corral Avenue, bracket 686 and 688 Irene Crescent on bracket. These are consent in mind of various applications to subdivide the property into 3 parcels, which will consist of 2 new townhouse dwellings and the existing 2-story dwelling. We adjourned this application earlier on September 21st to clarify the servicing corridors issue. And the applicant was going to discuss these with engineering staff at the city. Mr. Kalitsa is the agent for the applicant. Is he there? Mr. Kalitsa,
Yes,
your address for the record, please.
76 Chamberlain Avenue.
Okay. Before we begin, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time.
I do affirm.
Okay, so before we begin, your issue regarding servicing has been clarified.
Yes, it has been clarified to the satisfaction of the engineering department.
Okay. All right. You had a question, Mr. Wildman?
Yes, I would prefer hearing that from staff, please, Mr. Chair.
I'm going to ask them. For the planning department, this issue regarding servicing corridors has been addressed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, the city's concerns about the servicing in the rear have been satisfied and the conditions were amended accordingly. I think there was one that was slightly changed.
Okay. All right. So before we begin, there's some changes to the public notice regarding variance A. Now reads to permit a reduced front yard setback of 2.47 meters, whereas the bylaw requires a front yard setback of 3.5 meters. Variance C now reads to permit a reduced front yard setback of 1.87 meters, whereas the bylaw requires a front yard setback of 4.5 meters. Variance F now reads to permit a reduced front yard setback of 1.87 meters, whereas the bylaw requires a front yard setback of 4.5 meters. And variance I now reads to permit 2 parking spaces to be located in a front or corner side yard, whereas the bylaw does not permit parking spaces to be located in the front or corner side yard. So those are the amendments made to the application since the last time we met. So Mr. Kalitsa, briefly on this and to the matter of the 4 tests that are necessary for us to look at to approve this application.
Mr. Chairman, did you want me to address the amendment to the application as well?
Sure.
I'm going to, this was a bit of a surprise to us. I think I'll have Mr. Hamilton explain why it is a front yard now rather than a corner side yard in these applications, if I can.
Mr. Hamilton, Mr. Kalitsa would like some clarification. Can you provide it, please?
Certainly. The severance of the townhouse creates independent lots, and each of these lots, despite being one dwelling, now have different front yards. So the zoning bylaw applies the yards differently than they were originally considered in the wording of the variance. The corner side yard and front yard setback performance standards are exactly the same. It's just the naming of the actual yards that needs to change. When we look at the provision of an interior yard, the amenity area requirement in the rear yard, this doesn't account for the changing of the yards, but it is addressed appropriately through the variances. If that makes sense.
That's satisfactory, Mr. Kalitsa?
It's satisfactory to me, yes. As long as it doesn't cause any issues with the application or the hearing, it's fine with me.
Oh, okay. All right, please proceed.
Okay, could I have these slides up, please? I'll give you the Coles Notes version of this planning rationale.
That's fine.
Thank you. So the topics that I will be going through are on that left-hand side. This application deals with a property at the corner of Irene Crescent and Currill Avenue. There's an existing house, it's a single-family dwelling at the corner. We're adding 2 dwelling units to the back of it along Irene Crescent to create a 3-door row. You'll note in this image that there's 2.5-story apartments along Irene and across the street on Irene, and then on Currill Avenue it's a mixture of doubles and singles. Next slide, please. So I've described to you what it is, and you'll see the image below from Irene Crescent. So on the left-hand side, we have the single and then the two units added to it to create a three-door row. On the upper right-hand corner is the parcel plan, just to explain what's happening. So on part one, we have the existing single family dwelling parts 1, 4, and 5 actually. Lot 2, part 2 is one of the new units, part 2 and part 6. And the last unit, the third dwelling in the row, is on part 3 and 7. The parts that are numbered 4, 5, and 6 are rights of way for generally services. There are no services on Irene Crescent. I'll note that. And part 7 has to do with accessory use for parking. Okay. Next slide. Just go through this quickly. So it's as I said, it's at the corner of Curral and Irene. No services on Irene. Cural's streetscape is 2-story semis and singles. Irene is generally 2.5-story apartment buildings, and you see the photographs. Next slide. This shows the site plan. The orange is the existing dwelling. The red are the 2 new dwelling units. Now, what happened here is that this site does allow 3 units in terms of site area, but we were constrained and challenged by a few things that began to dictate the configuration and location of this building on this site. One is the existing home, of course. It's there. We wanted to maintain it. There's a hydro line that runs along the rear property line with a significant setback that we had to maintain. There were a number of trees on this site, most of which we were able to keep, some we could not. Lastly, as I said, Irene Crescent doesn't have any services on it. Next slide. So the variances, although there are 10 variances, many of them are repeated just because of the nature of the development. But the variances, if I can just consolidate them, have to do with the lot area of lot 2, unit 2, part 2, interior and now front yard setbacks, they were corner, and then the parking location. I'll direct you to the image at the right-hand bottom of the site of the drawing. The dotted line indicates what we are allowed to build under the bylaw. The orange is what we are building, and again, that was influenced by the existing dwelling and the hydro setback. Next slide, please. So this shows the building in its context, and on the image, the overall view from Curral, you can see that this 3-door row actually makes a nice transition between the 2.5-story apartment buildings and the doubles and singles that are along Curral. So we were able to maintain much of the streetscape and the soft landscaping, mainly by consolidating the parking. In our opinion, this fits very well into the neighborhood. Next slide, please. So consultation with stakeholders You saw his staff report, no major concerns. City Forester did have some issues, but we addressed those. City Engineering are on board now. The Westboro Community Association are actually in support of the.
Yes, we note that.
Okay. And we contacted the abutting neighbors as we usually do. Next slide, please. So with regards to the 4 tests, the variances are minor in nature. When applying the impact test, the variances are considered minor as they do not create undue adverse impacts on its surroundings. The variances maintain the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw. As the proposed development is compatible with the residential character of the neighborhood, the variances do maintain the intent of the official plan, both the current official plan and the proposed official plan. And lastly, the variances are desirable for the appropriate development and use of the land. And this test for appropriateness has a lot to do with fit and compatibility. We feel that, yes, the proposal does fit well within the streetscape and the community. And this is confirmed and affirmed by the Westboro Community Association. And I'll leave it at that, Mr. Chairman. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Any questions or comments from the panel regarding this application? Ms. McLean.
Just one observation, Mr. Klitza. It looked like the roof of the middle unit might overhang the existing the severance line for the existing house. So I'm just going to leave that with you. I'm not sure how you're going to address that, but just an observation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
I note that there are a number of requested conditions, Mr. Kalitza. Cash in lieu of parkland, a letter of undertaking for tree securities, independent services confirmed, a joint use and maintenance agreement, and the submission of a grading and drainage plan at the building permit stage.
Yes, I reviewed all those with the applicant, and we have no issues with that.
We note that the planning department has no concerns. The neighbors obviously have no concerns. We have no correspondence from them, and we do have correspondence from the Westboro Community Association in support of the application. We also have on the speakers list Heather Mitchell from the Westboro Community Association. Is she there?
Yes, I am. Hi, I'm just here to wave the flag and say I think it's a great project. You don't even need to turn the clock on. We've been consulted. We had a very good meeting. This project is I feel very complicated, and I appreciate with the lack of services and so on, and some of the technical aspects that frankly escape me, but seem to be the owner seems to be prepared to take them on. It's a very difficult corner. As I say, I know it's complicated. I would just invite the committee to take that into consideration. It's a great project. We need more of these kind of projects in our neighborhood. We feel it'll be more affordable than some of the housing that's going in our neighborhood. So thank you very much. And that's really all I have to say is it has our full support. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Mitchell. Okay. So any further comments from the neighbors? Ms. Young, our forester, please proceed.
Hi, thanks, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to mention, because I don't see the revised plan in the committee files on SharePoint, I just wanted to note that there was a revised site plan sent in by the applicant, making some minor modifications to the driveway and a walkway in the front. So I just wanted to make sure that that's noted in case the decision is tied to plans. It should be that plan.
Ms. Williams, do we have that revised site plan? Do you know?
Mr. Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, if you just want to put up the site plan again, I can confirm whether it's the most recent site plan again.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, we don't seem to have that on file. So if the applicant could provide that by email.
Can I see the site plan? I think it's slide number 4. Yes, this is the revised one. You'll see that the walkway beside, I forget, tree number 2 has been shifted. So this site plan is the most recent one.
Okay.
We don't have this site plan on our file, so we will require it.
So you can submit that. You can submit that to committee, Mr. Kalitza.
Will do.
Okay, and you're satisfied, Ms. Young, that that's what you just saw was the correct or the revised site plan?
Yes, that does look to be the one that I reviewed, so that's good.
Okay. All right. Any other further comments regarding this application? Okay, so in the matter of 305 Curl, 686 and 688 Irene Crescent, consent and minor variance applications to subdivide the property 3 parcels. The 2 new townhouse dwellings and the existing 2-story dwelling, all in favor of the application as amended. Your application is approved unanimously, Mr. Kalitza. Good luck with your project.
Thank you kindly.
All right.
Have a good day.
You too. We will now deal with item 12 on the agenda, which was removed at the planning department's request from the adjournment request earlier on in the hearing. This is an application of 368 Tweedsmuir Avenue, minor variance applications to permit a reduced rear yard setback for bicycle sheds and increase the number of units from 12 to 16 permitted for a low-rise apartment building. And Ms. Hill is the agent for the applicant.
Hello.
Before we begin, do you solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee is posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing, be clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time?
Yes, I do so swear.
Okay. All right, Ms. Hill, a new site plan has been submitted to us, I believe.
Yep, the latest revision was only a revision to the labels on the rear yard green space.
Okay. And the planning department and you have resolved their issue regarding the bay window
Yes.
question. I think they've agreed to, they've indicated that. All right, if you'd like to proceed and the application meets the requirements of the 4 tests on the planning, please proceed.
Okay. Could I have my slides? So this is the image of the proposed development. On the right, you see the 2-story development that exists now towards the north of our project. And to the left, you see massed in white, something like what the future development will likely be to the south of us. It's under review right now as a site plan application. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This is our site plan. So you can see it's an apartment building located a little more than 5 feet from the side yards. No parking on site. Rear yard contains a garbage shed and a bike shed. Next slide, please. You'll see the site is marked there in blue. The purple is that site subject to the redevelopment, multi-story development. I'm showing this just to really emphasize the location of this site as a transition between the 2-story neighborhood and the new development along the traditional main street of Richmond Road. Next slide, please. So there you see the site is the yellow star. And just to the left of it will be that large new development. You can see there's already been some new development on the street as well, on Richmond Road as well, within view of our site. And we're very close to the transit station. Next slide, please. There you see bottom left of the slide, the apartment building on Richmond Road that's within view of the site. Next slide, please. This is the site. Next slide. A few more in the neighborhood. That's across the street. And next slide. That's a view up to Richmond Road. So the Whistler's restaurant on the right will be replaced with new development. Next slide, please. That might be what it looks like. Next slide, please. So there's our development from a few more angles. Next slide. And back to the site plan. Next slide. So again, you can see the location of the neighbor's house to the north of us there on the slide. And what we're proposing is to build, the project is zoning compliant with only one exception, which would be that instead of the permitted 12 units, we're proposing 16. But the footprint, the orientation, the size of the building is all permitted. So we could build this exact same building with this exact orientation in this location with fewer units inside. It would look the same on the outside. Everything would be laid out the same. It would just be divided up into fewer, larger units. Right now, the unit mix is 1/4 2 bedrooms, and the remaining units are a mix of 1 bedrooms and bachelors. Next slide, please. This is a clip from the new official plan, and the next slide zooms in on the location on the map where we are, the yellow dot. So you can, what I'm trying to point out here is that we are within an overlay of the new official plan. So the intent there of the official plan is to designate areas that are particularly targeted for change and for intensification. The community plan also suggests that these locations close to the traditional main street should be intensified in order to bring more shoppers to the area. And it's our location in proximity to the traditional main street for this site that exempts it from any parking requirement. So it's our position that the project is very desirable for the neighborhood. It's just the kind of intensification that the plans call for. There's no increased impact by adding more smaller units, and those smaller units are particularly in demand. The neighborhood is predominantly larger units. So we feel that it meets the intent of the zoning bylaw, which the R4 zoning is intended to allow for multi-units. It meets the intent of it's appropriate for the neighborhood. Interestingly, when we consulted with neighbors, everybody was totally on board with the way that it looks. So it's architecturally appropriate. Next slide, please. Actually, one more. There we go. As an architectural and visual bridge between the higher density and the lower density. So it's actually really desirable in meeting that intent. And it meets the intent of our existing official plan by providing density close to transit. Peter is also with me on this call, and Peter, if there is anything that you would like to add. I can't see Peter. Is he here? Maybe not. Okay. So any questions?
Well, I have one question, Ms. Hill, and you're aware of what the Westboro neighborhood went through during the rewrite of its zoning bylaw, the R4. And there's a reason why the 12-unit maximum on sites like this was put in place. So why are we asking for a variance?
So this area isn't within the study area of the Westboro rezoning. So it is beyond that. It's beyond that area. That's right. It's interesting little sort of conflict in the zoning, the official plans, and the community plans, where in our affluent project you're going to see next, that area is zoned for more units, whereas this one is zoned for it limits it to 12 units, but the zoning predates the new official plan, which clearly has designated this site and targeted this in an overlay area for intensification. So then
an official plan, Ms. Hill, which has not yet received approval from the ministry.
That is very true. Very true. Well said.
So we are dealing with the old official plan, Ms. Hill.
Okay. Well, the old official plan is encouraging intensification in proximity to transit stations, and we are very close to a transit station. The zoning for the R4 landed on a number of 12 for this size of lot, partly because as part of the analysis of that zoning, it was assumed that 12 units would fit. Okay. But in fact, 16 fit just fine. So I think the intent of the bylaw was to have intensification that fit comfortably on a site of that size. Yep. And we've designed something that fits comfortably.
All right, so as far as you're concerned, there will not be a negative impact from this development.
I believe there'll be a positive impact.
Hang on, let me finish. And the other two criteria we use in assessing the variance, that the variance is not too important to be minor.
Oh no, and I believe that it's minor, given that it doesn't change the outside of the building or the impact of the building on its surroundings in any way. It allows for more smaller units, so that means that households can be fewer people, smaller people, rather than larger households with people living together. So it's more a matter of your demographic mix within the building than the population that's being housed there.
And finally, that in your opinion, this variance cannot be considered too large to be minor.
No, absolutely not.
Okay. All right. I see Mr. Hume here. Do you wish him to add to this conversation?
So, Mr. Chair, I was just going to refresh my memory with respect to the unit count. And when the city in their report on the new R4 zone brought forward their report, they did include 8 and 12 unit counts, but they also said in the body of the report that when they recognized when opportunities arose, applicants might seek variances to allow more units. So there's some flexibility in when you started to look at lot sizes and where they were located. The city, although settling on some numbers, did contemplate in a variety of scenarios or did appreciate that there would be cases where applicants would apply to the Committee of Adjustment to adjust or to increase those numbers to better fit the site circumstances. And I think Ms. Hill has illustrated the site circumstances quite well.
Thank you, Mr. Hume. We also have on the speakers list, any questions from the members of the panel so far? The applicant, agents? Mr. White.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As an old suburban planner, I sometimes cringe when I see reductions in parking space requirements to 0. In this case, I think in reality, what we're talking about is a variance of 2.4, which in my mind means a reduction of 3 parking spaces. I don't think you can park a car in 0.4 of a parking space. Just a question of the applicant. Is there anything in the either lease agreements or agreements of purchase and sale here that clearly acknowledge, have the prospective lessee or purchaser acknowledge that parking is not available? And secondly, that being the case, what are the parking options in the area? Are there special parking arrangements on street, or are they limited to the 3-hour parking, which is general across the city?
This property, in fact, isn't required any parking at all. I think you're thinking of our Athlone project that will follow this. This project has no parking requirement because of its proximity to the traditional main street. And so the zoning intent there is to really promote or attract tenants with walking lifestyles who will populate those commercial spaces with purchasing power. In addition, it is very close to a transit station. So yes, there are some parking options in the area. There are some lots, and as new buildings are being constructed, there are sometimes surplus spaces in underground parking, but the street parking is limited to 3 hours.
Apologize for that mistake. I guess I was reading the wrong report, but and I appreciate your answer on this one.
Just getting prepped for the next application.
I will ask that question, Mr. Chair, when the time comes up.
Okay. Anything further, Ms. Hill?
I would like to request that if we are tied, if you do approve the application and if we are tied to drawings on file, perhaps you can insert the word generally tied to drawings on file.
Why
that
would
way
we do that?
There's any very minor tinkering. So for example, some adjustment of the size of the garbage pad upon the request of the garbage group at the city, that adjustment could be made. We have been through the first round of comments for site plan, and so we don't anticipate any significant changes, but we wouldn't want to get stuck if we just needed to make the pad, say 6 inches bigger or smaller, or something of that level of significance.
But correct me if I'm wrong, but city staff have a certain level of discretion after this committee deals with an application to make these kinds of modifications without coming back to us.
Is that true?
That's correct. Seen it for years. So I don't think I'd be concerned if I were here, if you're worrying about a 6-inch extension to your,
Okay.
Garbage
pad. Mr. White?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, just something else came up. There was some discussion about some potential issue with respect to bay windows on the building. And I don't think we heard how that was resolved.
Okay.
Either
Yeah.
Ms. Hill or Mr. Hamilton, one or the other.
I can start, but if you prefer.
Mr. Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We did provide in the revised report a statement from city staff about both Athlone and Tweedsmuir that we don't necessarily agree with the interpretation of the bay windows. We're just providing caution that they may not be zoning compliant at the time of building permit stage.
So we're aware of the ways in which building bay windows, the compliance of bay windows is interpreted and reinterpreted by the plans examining staff at building permit stage. We have recently received a permit for a bay window just like these. And we know that the difference of opinions around the interpretation of bay windows is triggered by an internal bulletin in the city that has a definition of a bay window that is different than the definitions and the words that are in the zoning bylaw. But we are confident that with a little bit of encouragement from us, when it comes time for a building permit, staff will be encouraged to follow the bylaw. And we're not going to ask you guys to vary language that is in a bulletin.
Why should a bulletin influence us? We have to deal
Correct.
with the bylaw. We deal with the bylaw.
That is correct.
Staff memos are, quite frankly, not particularly important on this one. Anyway, okay. Thank you, Ms. Hill. Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. All right. So in the manner of an application at 368 Tweedsmuir Avenue, reduced rear yard
Mr.
setback.
Chair, we do have a registered speaker.
Oh, that's great. I'm sorry. Thank you. I almost missed that. We have Mr. Wong from 440 Dawson Avenue who would like to speak to this application. Mr. Wong.
Larry Wong, for the record, 440 Dawson. I see on the new revised site plan, there's now only 2 accessory shacks or structures in the rear yard. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And the both have the correct setbacks as per the bylaw?
That is correct.
Thank you very much. On the second variance, on the 16 to 12, maybe my interpretation is wrong on the bylaws, but it's not zoned for that area. And is that a minor variance or is that a zoning change?
The applicant has applied to us for a variance to the bylaw to allow 4 more units in a newly constructed or in to be newly constructed building.
Yes, but then they're ending up with a 16-unit dwelling where it's not zoned for.
Well,
is that
the province of Ontario? You can seek relief from the zoning bylaw, and this is exactly what's happening here. So
now, if they get the 16 units, is there now a no parking variance attached to that, or
no,
are we in
no
a special
parking? There's
zone?
no parking required for this area. Period.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, generally the bylaw says up to 12 units, no parking.
Yeah.
Because of the proximity to the traditional main street, that does not apply.
Okay. That's all my questions then. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Wong. Okay. So in the matter of 368 Tweedsmuir, and I apologize to Mr. Wong for almost forgetting him. I did have it on the list. I just didn't look. Minor variance application permitted reduced rear yard setback for bicycle sheds and increase the number of units 12 to 16 permitted for a low-rise apartment building. All in favor of the application as amended?
We're just voting on the increase in the number of units, right? We're not.
Yeah.
We deleted variance A?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Variance A, yes. Just the number of units. All in favor? All right, your application's approved, Ms. Hill. Good luck with your project.
Thank you.
Oh, she's still there. Can't get enough of us.
No, it's a lot of fun. Got to stick around.
Yeah, sometimes it is. Sometimes it isn't. All right. The last application on the agenda today is item 13, 436 Athlone Avenue. And this is an application to minor variance application produce rear yard setbacks, reduce setbacks for the rear yard bicycle sheds, reduce rear landscape buffer, and reduce parking for the construction of a low-rise apartment building. So this again was adjourned to deal with some issues. We understand that variance C has been deleted. Ms. Hill.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so let's do the oath or solemn declaration before we start. You solemnly swear or affirm that the notice provided to you as part of the application process and by the committee was posted at the property to which the application applies for the prescribed number of days before the hearing and clearly visible and legible during the entirety of that time.
Yes, I do so swear.
Okay, so we adjourned this and changes have been made, so please proceed with your presentation.
Okay, thank you. So this is an image of the proposed development. So you'll see we're proposing a 6-story apartment building. Sorry, 3-story, 16-unit apartment building. it's the same shape and size as the Tweedsmuir development that we just showed you. However, the architectural features on the front facade have been designed to be appropriate to this street context. Next slide, please. So very similar site plan, similar setbacks, similar approach to garbage and bike storage, landscaping. Next slide, please. The property is located just one house in from Byron Avenue, or south of Byron Avenue, in the blue rectangle there. And there's a new development just to the north that is on Byron, and a new development to the rear, a semi, also fronting onto Byron. Next slide, please. So there the location is marked with a star. As you can see, it's one block from the Richmond Road shopping strip, 5-minute walk to the Loblaws. It's close to the Westboro Transit Station. It's very close to a linear park. So really a genuinely walkable location again. Next slide, please. That gives you a bit of a closer look. And then if you could click through the next 3 slides, this gives some idea of context. And the kind of quality of architecture that's around us. There's been quite a lot of consultation for this file. We met with neighbors early in the process before we had designed everything because we wanted to get people's input early. We have been meeting with them, well, we've met with them a number of times since, and have been able to respond to some of their feedback. For example, colors, materials, placement of windows, we have gotten some generally positive feedback about the architectural style and materials on the front facade. So that's encouraging. We will be keeping the front street trees, which has been encouraging to people as well. But some concerns remain. Next slide, please. There we go. So just a couple more angles for you to see how it fits into the street. And one more slide. So though it is a flat roofed building, in order to manage stormwater and reduce the chance of flooding in this area, or contribute to that, it does have this sloped feature to fit in with the architecture around it. Next slide, please. This project is within the Westboro study area, and so the rear yard buffer is required partly because of its location within this area. It's zoned to allow for as many units as we would like, but there is a parking requirement that kicks in after 12 units. So we would like to propose no parking on site. If we park more cars, any cars on the site, it significantly reduces the number of units. And it seems clear in the zoning and in the intent of upzoning and zoning R4 in these areas is really to encourage intensification and the development of small units within small apartment buildings. And because the area is just so lovely to walk in, we don't see the need for parking for an additional 4 units. So 12 units would be acceptable here under zoning without parking. We feel that those 12 occupants can live really delightful lives without a parking space or a car. And we can't imagine why it makes a difference for 4 more. And the building works really well with 16 units. So next slide, please. The corner location is unique because it means that our backyard is somebody's side yard. Next slide, please. So there you there you see that the neighboring house that at the back of our backyard is quite close. So this isn't a regular rear yard condition. Next slide, please. Okay. I'm going to talk now about the green buffer. And I don't know, you might consider giving me a little more time.
Please
I'll try and go
proceed,
quickly. Yeah, okay. So The rear yard buffer provision of the Westboro zoning was intended to make sure that the center of the block was preserved. Usually a person's rear yard is at the center of the block. In this case, our rear yard isn't at the center of the block. So we've been tinkering with the rear yard, next slide please, to do our very best to provide green space in the corner of our yard that is toward the center of the block to meet the intent of the green buffer requirement. We've also worked hard to actually meet the letter of the bylaw over the last 2 weeks when it comes to the green buffer, and we think we have. But we know that when we go for building permits, there is sure to be disagreement because this clause of the bylaw is so complicated in its wording. We're pretty sure we'll get into trouble at permit phase when we try to explain that this meets the letter of the law. So we're asking for a variance out of an abundance of caution to make sure that it will be okay at permit phase. We've worded the variance with the help of city staff, and we think we've kind of covered all our bases there. So we think, and city staff agree that I think that this might actually meet the letter of the law, but we're just not 100% confident about interpretation. So we're asking for the variance to cover our bases.
All right.
Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk next about rear yard setback. Next slide. This is a view on our existing property towards our backyard, and you see how prominent the neighbor's wall is. So this yard is not really part of that open space in the center. And next slide, please. We're proposing to line up our rear wall with our neighbor to the north's rear yard. On the image at the top left, you see a zoning compliant condition rear yard of ours. And then the bottom right image, you see the position that we're proposing in line with our neighbor. The visual impact on everybody else around is it's almost indiscernible, the difference. It's a 5-foot difference. It significantly improves the unit quality inside, and it's just not very visible out here. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so there we see the diagram of the green buffer. So we've been able to meet the intent of green buffer. We've got space for our garbage, we've got space for our bikes, we've got lots of landscaping and amenity space. We actually exceed the amenity requirement. We're matching the rear yard setback of our northern neighbor. We're providing quality interior spaces, and the variance is small, it's 5 feet. So next slide, and I'll stop there. Oh, well, there's a zoom in on our backyard. Next slide. And I'll just leave it there. We think that this is a great contribution to the neighborhood. It's the neighborhood of predominantly larger units, and it lacks the diversity that this building could bring, allowing for smaller households in smaller units.
Ms. Hildy, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I saw balconies at 2 levels for the rear units.
That's right.
And the impact on privacy of those balconies and the overlooking impacts on neighbors.
Yep, that came up in our community consultation when we actually first went to the community. The balconies were separated on the back, and as a result of concerns expressed, we brought them together. They're tight to each other now. Okay. And as far from the corners as possible in the back. There was also concern about overlook onto the terrace or balcony of our northern neighbor. So using our 3D model, we were able to determine that the viewing angle is such that you can't actually see from one amenity space to the other in the back.
And those balconies face the side wall of another apartment building, I take it?
Of a semi, yes. So that condition is something that happens on corner lots around the city regularly. And he does have some windows looking that way. Obviously, his primary windows are to the front and the back, and he doesn't have a lot of windows looking towards the apartment building that we propose.
It looks like your neighbor's primary amenity space is on the roof of his dwelling.
Mhm.
Okay. Okay. All right. Any questions from the panel so far? Mr. White?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just back to my question on the parking. I think I saw in one of the slides that there was mentioned that tenants will be advised that no parking is available. So is that incorporated in the lease agreement that's signed?
Yes, it will be. Yeah. And Jeff Leeper has been really clear about how frustrating it is in the neighborhood and for his office when that doesn't happen, because there's confusion then. So yeah, we will put it in our lease agreements.
Mr. Chair, just another question. Those bay windows that were some dispute here, are those the ones at the rear of the building then? Not.
No, those are the bay windows that are at the front.
So they're being treated as an encroachment, permitted encroachment under the zoning bylaw? Is that how you're dealing with it to avoid the bay window issue that seems to have cropped up?
No, we continue to consider those bylaw correct expressions of bay windows according to the bylaw. They meet the definition of the bay window in the bylaw very specifically.
So they meet the standard front yard setback requirement?
No, so yeah, the front wall of the building is at the setback. The bay window projects into the front yard, but it does meet the bay window definition.
So, Mr. Chair, perhaps I could get some further clarification from staff on this. My understanding is that now the bylaw is being interpreted such that those bay windows are a permitted projection into the required yard. And there may be some question when it gets time to, when it comes to the building permit application, there may be some discussion that has to be had in order to clarify that. But from the planning department's point of view in interpreting the zoning bylaw, those bay windows are permitted obstruction. Is that correct?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. Staff have cautioned the agents that the proposed bay windows are not considered bay windows by the City of Ottawa, as they violate the rules requiring them to be located no closer than 0.3 meters from a wall from which they project from. So therefore, as currently proposed, staff's opinion that the proposed building is not compliant with the front yard setback and will require the additional variance. However, the agent has let the department know that they will be proceeding despite this advice. So staff have commented on the variances independent of this issue. And that comes from the bulletin that was described earlier.
So thank you. So Mr. Chair, we are being asked to approve the minor variants that are before us. However, there is a possibility that there may be additional variance required on this building.
Staff have not told us that an additional variance is required. So we are not dealing with an additional variance request. Yes, Mr. White.
And it's my understanding that your job is not to vary bulletins.
No, we deal with the bylaw. We have no request from staff for an adjournment because there is an additional variance and therefore a recirculation of your application. So we will proceed.
So
what we have today.
Mr. Chairman, I wonder if I could just add some context for Mr. White around the parking requirements for developments such as this. So the R4 zone, the R4 UC zone in which this sits has a specific requirement that states that if a lot area is 450 square meters or less, no parking is allowed. So the bylaw contemplates that developments like this will have no parking. Unfortunately for us, we can't rely on that that provision in the bylaw because our lot is 461 square meters. However, when you look at the difference between a 450 square meter lot, which would prohibit all parking, and a 461 square meter lot, which is what we have, the differences are very small. And that's why we've chosen to rely on, or to seek reliance on, the portion of the bylaw that says, you know, you shouldn't have parking on smaller size lots, such as the one we're proposing here.
Okay, Mr. Wood.
Thank you.
All right, I know you're not 100% happy with the bay window thing, but we really don't have a request from the department for a further variance, and therefore a need for recirculation. So we'll have to just deal with it, what we have today.
Thank you,
If it comes up, we may see it back.
Thank you. I realize we have discretion here. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Anything further to add, Ms. Hill?
No, thank you.
Okay. All right. We have a number of speakers on the list to speak to this application. The first speaker on the list is Mr. Wong, who spoke to us on the last application. Mr. Wong, you there?
Sorry, I'm here. I guess clarification again. You rejigged your backyard to reduce your, I guess, meet the requirements for 2 accessory shelters and their correct setbacks.
That's correct.
Okay, and I noticed you have green space, more green space now.
Yes.
So
Yes, we do.
That satisfies one of my things. The no parking. That's a city policy, and I'm not to discuss city policy, but it doesn't really work in my opinion. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. We also have David and Peggy Morgan, 440 Athlone Avenue. Are they there?
We are, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Morgan, please proceed.
So, excuse me, this is not my natural habitat, so I'll try and follow the sort of procedure I've seen you using earlier in the afternoon. We have had the benefit of putting in our thoughts to the city planning people, and as well to the Committee of Adjustment in writing. And I don't intend to go back over those because they're obviously in your dockets, and you can.
Yes, we have them. We have them. We've read them. Yes.
Thank you. So rather than boringly go back through that, I really wanted to touch on 3 things. But before I do, I wanted to point out quite a bit of the documentation says we're on the east side of the street. We're not. We're on the west.
Yes.
And would be nice if that would rule out the application altogether, but I guess that's not the case. I want to correct for the second time Ms. Hill on the subject of the trees in the front. We are currently, as I'm sure you're all aware, going through an infrastructure project that has Byron will turn up, and was this year, but it's been delayed to next year, Athlone to be torn up as well. And in that plan, it says that those 2 trees that are on city property are going to be removed, so they will have to replace them if that's their intention. What I wanted to cover this morning was what's probably the elephant in the room, and the Y16, and then the in the block green area at the back, which I think the proponents have misinterpreted the intent of the infill bylaw. First of all, the elephant in the room. As has been pointed out by Ms. Hill, there are several buildings around us that are multi-unit, but units. Even when we moved in, over the back fence to the south is a rental, six unit rental set of apartments, or sort of house turned into apartments. which has occasionally had even 7 or 8 probably illegal units in it, but they don't provide any problem to us. During our tenure here, the lot to the north, to the end of at the end of our garden to the north, went from a single house money pit that several people have difficulty with into the double that is there now, the 3-story with a rooftop deck. We've been fortunate that both the current owner and the previous owners have used that deck judiciously and been good neighbors and not created any problems for us, but it does overreach our property. Thirdly, the house immediately to our south, which is a twin to our own, built about 110 years ago, went through this. It's my only other experience with a committee of adjustment. We went through that, and we were able to lend support to the people putting the infill in there. And that was because they made every effort to position it so that it was out of the line of sight from our windows and things of that nature. And they've turned out to be good neighbors as well. So the point I would like to make is that we, and I suspect any of our other neighbors who are on would support me in this, we are not against intensification. And I think that's an important point to understand before we look at the particulars of the building. The second thing that is difficult to come to terms with is where we expected 2 or more units to go into this space when the house was being sold. Indeed, I had to reassure the lady who previously owned it that we understood that that was a possibility. It was somewhat of a shock to, I think, everybody on the street when the lead off on what was coming in here was a 16-unit, 3-story building. And as we've stated in our submissions to your committee and to the city, it's quite unlike despite it being virtually the same drawings that we started with 368 Tweedsmuir, it's really quite unlike the Tweedsmuir situation insofar as the built form of the new building as it's supposed to be, using its full height and the amount of rear setback that we look for, is just going to overwhelm. Am I to stop, or can I have a little more time?
Take another minute or so, Mr. Morgan. We have other people on the list that needs to speak.
Sure. So there are several markers that say how the number of units maybe should be determined in here. The obvious one is the 2.4 parking spots are suggesting that the building shouldn't have more than 12 because that's the rule you've laid out for yourself. Our lot, which is supposed to be a transition lot, is only allowed to have 6 units on it, so it's a lower number. And to Mr. Hume's point, if the lot were less than 450 square feet, and it's 12 square meters, I know it's 12 more square meters than that, it would be held to 8 as well. Finally, I want to suggest that the proponents have misinterpreted the green in the middle of the block. If you look at the image on 14 on page 13 of their presentation that was sent before, that green space should go across the back of the 2 lots, and the rear setback, it's our suggestion, should be in line with the back of our building, because that's what green in the middle of the block is meant to say. And the only two lots in the middle of the block here are ours and the one that's being proposed.
Okay. Yes. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. We also have Mr. Jeff Lewis, 263 Wesley.
Mr. Chairman, thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Okay.
My name's Jeff Lewis. I live at 263 Wesley, which is across the street from the proposed new construction. The new build looks out on our backyard. I'm going to echo some of the points that David just made. I think this is the wrong building in the wrong location. And the three of the variances that they're included in the list, I think, speak to that. The first is the setback. They're talking about changing the rear setback. I've been in this house about 30 years now. Previous construction on that lot, sorry, not on that lot, but in that block, there's been progressive reduction in the rear setback, which has led to progressive reduction in green space and sequential removement of mature trees. So I think an increased setback, a reduced setback again, is going to continue that trend.
Okay.
And then the lack of the parking, points D and E on the list. Even if the tenants themselves don't have cars, I think people around them may have vehicles, delivery drivers, friends and relatives. So this is they're on a dead-end street, so it's going to, I think, potentially present some traffic issues if there's no parking on the site, but there's going to be some vehicles coming and going. So I would just ask the committee to carefully consider the applications here. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. By the way, I know a number of folks on Athlone and Wesley are listening. If you're really concerned about parking, this is something you can bring up with your counselor. We have a similar situation on my street a long time ago, and we put in guest permit parking. And only those of us living in single family dwellings or duplexes or triplexes can get a permit to park on the street. No multi-residential units are allowed to have on-street parking permits under the guest permit parking system. So there is a potential solution to your parking problem. You're just going to have to pursue this through your counselor. Anyway.
Yeah, we're an older neighborhood, so I think we've probably got some issues that we're probably going to have to resolve over time.
Yeah, but it's something you may want to consider. It's worked quite well in my neighborhood. Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Okay. Next we have Mr. Davies, 273 Wesley Avenue.
There we go. Okay. Presumably you can hear me.
Yes, your name and address for, well, are you
Of
Emily
course.
Davies?
No, I'm Eileen Davies, and my address is 442 Athlone Avenue. Our residence is in between Mr. Morgan's and the house on the corner.
Okay.
And I am going to take the opportunity, thank you for being able to speak, and I'll be brief, but just to your comment about talking to our counselor, that's an old discussion that has been going on, and there's been no suggestion. We've raised the issue of parking permits and approvals, and that's never been obviously put forward as a potential solution. So I'd just like to read to you, when I wrote a couple of weeks ago, I said, our opposition is twofold. We are concerned that the proposed redevelopment does not attempt to conform with new bylaw development changes, but rather to test the city's willingness to set those aside based on the developer's wishes, and that justification for the variance requests has not been provided. I recognize that you have already acknowledged that that new plan has not been approved provincially. However, one would argue that that new plan is what people are supposed to be working towards. We participated in a consultation with RGH Architect Incorporated, but heard no compelling argument for the increase of units from 12 as approved under the bylaw to 16, except the developer's desire to build beyond the newly approved bylaw. The resultant variances requested in this application directly attempt to set aside carefully considered requirements of the bylaws to accommodate increased density in residential neighborhoods while continuing to anticipate and avoid unnecessary impact on adjacent properties. We are also very concerned that this redevelopment of 436 Athlone in no way attempts to accommodate the very limited 2 parking spaces tenant requirement or even minimal visitor parking. Prior to Athlone being closed due to the Byron construction, many individuals parked on our block from Wesley to Byron daily and walked to their yoga classes, restaurants, shops, etc. I highly doubt that we are going to see people renting units in potential basement parking spaces so that they can have a car and live on Athlone. Weekend church services result in our block of Athlone lined with cars for a short period of time due to the overflow of the church's parking lot, and winter merely increases the challenges. That said, these are minor inconveniences as they're time limited. The proposed redevelopment, however, implies that bicycles will replace vehicles as a means of transportation in an Ottawa winter and makes no effort to abide by the new minimal bylaws. In summary, this proposed redevelopment makes no effort to comply with the bylaw requirements and once again establishes a precedent that will be directly opposed to the intention of the new bylaw development changes. While we realize this Committee of Adjustment is not responsible for parking per se, we believe that the absence of a parking permit program or accommodation for off-site parking should be brought to the attention of the appropriate city manager in order to address the issues of intensification vis-a-vis parking permits, regulations, etc. I understand that that's not the role of this committee per se, but I would suggest that if there are enough complaints that come forward under this committee's auspices in hearing these issues, that it certainly should be something that should be raised and addressed. And the only other thing I would draw your attention to once again is a letter that was put forward by Emily Davies on 273 Wesley that actually went through all of the bylaws and looking at the requests and the refusal rationale. And in that letter, she pointed out how a number of these issues, if not all of them, were directly opposed to what the bylaw had been intended to create in the first instance. So that unfortunately is, in my mind, a sad state of affairs when we get a new plan that took a long, long time to create. And the first instances we're seeing now are requests to, in some way, amend that those requirements just to satisfy, and we were told it was to satisfy the developer's desire to have more income from the property. So you go from 12 to 16. Not a surprise, but a discouragement. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Davies. And the last speaker we have on the list today is Jane Bradley, 259 Wesley. Is she there? Apparently not. All right, Ms. Hill, if you'd like to respond to the neighbors' concerns.
So I would remind the committee that we're not varying or asking for a variance for the number of dwelling units in the building, most importantly. And we do see that the number of units actually does meet, I mean, obviously it meets the bylaw, but it meets the intent of the official plan, old and new, to intensify. It meets the intent of the zoning change in that Westboro study area to have more smaller units. So I understand Ms. Davies' concern about parking, and my office continues to share concerns about parking with the city as they plan intensification. But clearly, this kind of intensification is appropriate in this location and desirable. And the bylaw itself recognizes that on small lots, like lots only, as Peter noted, lots identified in size to be about the size of ours, it's not functional or appropriate to be using up land that's ideal for intensification with parking spaces. So yes, I recognize that it can be difficult as more cars come into your neighborhood, but the end result of all of this is a shift to having more people walking. And this, if there's anywhere in our city that is ideal for a walking lifestyle, it would be this place on Athlone. So we think of this as an excellent example of what the city should be doing in terms of intensification. So intensification without cars in a walkable place.
Thank you, Ms. Hill. Any comments, questions from the other members of the panel? Mr. White?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question of staff. I wonder if they could give us, staff could give us a sort of a picture of the formalized pedestrian linkages here. You know, are there sidewalks on the streets? Are there convenient sidewalk connections to the transit station, or the transit station that's under construction there now? That sort of thing. I think that would be useful.
Mr. Hamilton? Or Ms.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't have the streetscape on hand right now in front of me. However, I do note that the subject site is within, I believe it was 550 meters from the future transit station. I can't recall if there was sidewalks. I believe the agent might have a better answer to that.
Mr. Chair, there's no sidewalks on Athlone. However, the subject property is only one property from Byron. And Byron, there is actually a linear park with a separated pedestrian path. So a very walkable place.
Yeah. All right, is that okay, Mr. As a response, Mr. White? Happy with that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering, with those pedestrian, and I'm not sure staff here could answer the question, but are those pedestrian linkages, particularly through the park that was mentioned, winter maintained? If we're going to promote pedestrian linkages, it strikes me that that would be an important factor to consider.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, I believe they are.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions from members of the panel? All right, well, we've heard from the applicant, and we've heard the concerns from the budding property owners. And I'd like to reserve on this application so we can further discuss what has been presented to us verbally today. And our decision will be available within 10 days. Thank you very much, ladies.
Mr. Chair, sorry, can I please interrupt and have the amendments to variance be read into the record?
I think I already spoke to that, but all right.
The variance B has been amended to say to permit a reduced landscape buffer at the rear property line comprising of an area equal to 37.9 square meters and abutting 40% of the rear lot line, whereas the bylaw requires a minimum landscape buffer that comprises an area of 45.86 square meters and abutting at least 50% of the rear lot line.
Okay. So I take it we don't have that committee, that amendment?
You have it on paper.
That was in the updated planning report that was submitted today.
When did you submit that planning report?
That was at lunchtime today after I received confirmation from the agent on the exact numbers.
Yeah. And when the committee was in the middle of a pre-meet. Okay. I'll have to take a look at that. All right. Thank you. So there'll be an amendment to that amendment to variance B. Variance C has been deleted. A, D, and E stay the same. I note that there are no requested conditions from departments. None of the agencies seems to have any concerns with this. Anyway, Mr. White. Can't hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With respect to that comment on the amendment to that B aspect of the notice, we're now dealing, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're now dealing with a variance in the area of the landscape buffer requirement, as opposed to dimension.
Yeah.
Looks like it's going from requirement of 45.86 square meters to 37.9 square meters, as opposed to the 3 meter or 0 meter to 3 meter dimension that's in the original notice. Is that correct?
That's what it sounded like to me.
Yeah, I think that significantly changes the merits of the minor variance that's requested.
Yeah, well, we'll discuss that in the reserve hearing. All right. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. The applicant or the notice of decision will be released in 10 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, we conclude this hearing of panel 1 of the Committee of Adjustment, and we'll move to the reserve.